Air France, Flight 447. Three pilots cannot agree on what is happening and all three are wrong. Air France, Flight 447. Departs Rio de Janeiro, bound for Paris with 228 people on board. It is a routine transatlantic overnight flight. The aircraft is a modern Airbus A330, one of the most technologically advanced commercial aircraft in the world. At 2 a.m. over the Atlantic Ocean, the aircraft enters a zone of turbulence associated with a large storm system. This is not unusual. Aircraft encounter turbulence constantly. What is unusual is what happens next. Ice crystals from the storm block the aircraft's pitot tubes, the external sensors that measure airspeed. The autopilot disconnects automatically as designed. The pilots must fly manually. The aircraft is flying normally at this point. But without reliable airspeed readings, the pilots become confused. First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonin, who takes the controls, pulls back on his stick. This raises the nose of the aircraft. The aircraft begins to climb. It should not be climbing. It needs to maintain altitude and speed. Captain Marc Dubois is resting in the crew rest area. He returns to the cockpit within seconds but cannot immediately understand what is happening. For the next 4 minutes, three pilots in a functioning aircraft with no mechanical failures fly it into the ocean. Bonin continues pulling back on his stick almost continuously, the exact opposite of what the situation requires. The aircraft stalls. The nose is pointed upward, but the aircraft is falling. The angle of attack alarms sound repeatedly. At one point, First Officer David Robert takes the controls and pushes the nose down. The correct action. The aircraft begins to recover. Then Bonin pulls back again. The aircraft hits the ocean at 11,000 feet per minute. All 228 people on board die. The flight recorders are not recovered until 2011, nearly 2 years after the crash. The investigation finds that Bonin never released back pressure on his stick for almost the entire 4-minute dive. His colleagues did not know he was doing this because Airbus side sticks are independent. When two pilots give conflicting inputs, they do not cancel each other out, and neither pilot can feel what the other is doing. A modern aircraft with functioning engines. 4 minutes. 228 people. One pilot who kept pulling back when he should have pushed forward. Air Canada Flight 143, a Boeing 767, runs out of fuel at 41,000 feet because someone confused pounds with kilograms. Air Canada Flight 143 departs Montreal bound for Edmonton on a clear summer evening. It is one of the first flights operated by Air Canada's new Boeing 767 fleet. The aircraft is so new that the fuel quantity indicators are not functioning correctly, a known issue that has not yet been resolved. Because the electronic fuel gauges are inoperative, the ground crew calculates the fuel load manually. This is where the mistake happens. Canada is in the middle of transitioning from imperial to metric measurements. The ground crew calculates the fuel needed in pounds. They should be calculating in kilograms. A kilogram is approximately 2.2 pounds. The difference between the two units means the aircraft takes off with roughly half the fuel it needs to reach Edmonton. Nobody catches the error. At 41,000 feet over Red Lake, Ontario, both engines flame out simultaneously. The cockpit goes almost completely silent. Captain Robert Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintel are suddenly flying the most expensive glider in history. A fully loaded Boeing 767 with no engine power whatsoever, descending at 2,000 feet per minute toward the Canadian wilderness. They have minutes to find somewhere to land. Quintal remembers that there is a decommissioned Royal Canadian Air Force base at Gimli, Manitoba, that has a runway. He calculates they might just reach it. What he does not know is that the runway has been converted into a drag racing track. It is race day. The track is full of people, cars, campers, and children riding bicycles. Captain Pearson executes a maneuver called a forward slip, a technique normally used in small propeller aircraft, almost never attempted in a commercial jet, to lose altitude rapidly and slow the aircraft down without engine power. The 767 touches down at Gimli at nearly twice its normal landing speed with no engine power and therefore no hydraulic braking assistance. The nose gear collapses on touchdown. The aircraft skids down the runway toward the crowd of spectators. It stops just short of the people on the track. All 61 passengers and 8 crew members survive. A few people on the ground sustain minor injuries from the commotion. The aircraft, which becomes known forever after as the Gimli glider, is repaired and returned to service. It flies for Air Canada until 2008. The investigation finds the fuel miscalculation in the ground crew paperwork within hours. Pounds instead of kilograms. 1 unit of measurement. A fully loaded Boeing 767 gliding silently over the Canadian wilderness with 69 people on board and a drag racing crowd at the end of the only runway in range. Everyone lives.